Today I'm going to watercolor this stained glass window from Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. As an architectural designer, Sagrada Familia is one of my favorite places on the planet. First things first, this image that I grabbed is the most straight on clear image that I could find of this particular window, but it's still not perfect, so I loaded it into this free version of Photoshop called Photopea. This program works great, especially if you want the power of Photoshop without the cost. This is the way to do it. I just wish they had knockoff programs this good for Illustrator and InDesign as well. I'm just using the horizontal and vertical lines in this glass to square everything up. Once I had my reference image printed out, I sketched it out on watercolor paper that I had already stretched. And then it was time to start selecting my colors. I made this color template that I use all the time to help me determine the right colors and values for my project. It also just really was good practice making this chart and seeing how different pigments lay down. We definitely have a warm palette here, so we're picking out some burnt sienna, raw sienna, yellow ochre, brown madder, Van Dyke brown, and a couple others. There also are a few light blue and green spots, so I'm going to use an olive green and a Prussian blue for those. I'm going to start out with some of these fun colors like this vibrant orange. With the way that my brain compartmentalizes things, I really want to paint just one window pane completely, then move on to the next. Unfortunately, that's not how this is going to work since I don't want the colors running together while they dry. So I won't be able to paint two squares that are different in color that are next to each other without one of them fully drying before I paint the other. Instead, what I'm going to have to do is paint each square of the same color throughout the whole piece, and I'll probably miss a bunch and have to go back and fill the gaps. This is honestly different from other watercolors that I've done because it feels like a little bit like a paint by numbers. Usually for watercolor, I'll slope the surface, do multiple overlapping washes and whatnot, but with this, it's really not necessary since I'm really just painting each little square individually. Now brushes. I'm really picky with my brushes. I more or less only use sable brushes, not synthetic, not squirrel. They just work better. They hold more water. They hold their shape better, and they have much better control. Say what you will about environmental issues or sourcing issues. If you're using synthetic, I beg you to just go buy a single ISAB number 6 and feel the difference. If you take care of it, a brush like that can last a lifetime, unlike this synthetic piece of junk that I use just to mix pigments. I'm now starting to branch out into some yellows. I usually only work from the paint tubes. Again, highly recommend high quality paints here. The Winsor Newton Pro or Cotman are my go-tos, but for this cadmium yellow, I do have to use my little Winsor Newton travel sketch box thing with the little paint cubes. I don't know what they're actually called, and they work great for sketching. For something like this, I try to avoid them, but here we are. This is all I've got, and it's gonna work just fine. It's honestly more of a personal preference for me. As long as the paints are good quality and Winsor Newton or higher, you should be good to go. All those like Amazon kits that you can buy for really cheap that have really cheap sketching paints in them, they're all trash and the paints just don't work. But if you happen to have a really good experience with one of these tiny little travel kits, let me know and tell me the brand because I'd love to hear a non-Winsor Newton cheap alternative. Alright, it's officially day 2 and I have not gotten much done at all, at least yesterday. So today I'm going to do a lot more and a lot faster. So far this is really coming along. I'm really happy with it. It's just taking absolutely forever. So we'll see how it goes today. I didn't think y'all needed to see this dark brown get painted, so I just went for it. I think value and saturation is something that a lot of watercolorists miss. This is basically just straight Van Dyke brown pigment with a tiny, tiny little amount of water in it, just to give it a real dark appearance, which I think really matches the style of the stained glass that I'm working with. It's like super saturated, the sun's coming through it, very vibrant, bright colors, but then when there's that brown glass, it's going to be very dark because there's not as much sun coming through it. I will say getting this brown on is giving me the first glimpse into what this final painting is going to look like, and I am really excited to see how it turns out. I'm starting to mix a light olive green for the miscellaneous green pieces throughout the whole piece. The green is really subtle, but I think it adds a lot to the composition as far as complexity and beauty. Same with the blue. It's just really nice subtle notes that I think really add up to something beautiful. So it's the end of day 2 and I am not done yet. As you can tell, all of my natural light is gone and it's not doing much for me anymore and I don't feel like turning on a light. So all I have to do is go around and do the border a little bit and some of the inside edges, like all this. There's a bunch of yellow that happens right here, but for the most part, All the browns are done, all of the reds are done, all the greens and all the other weird little colors are done. So, yeah. All right, day 3, and we are going to finish today. This thing has definitely taken me a lot longer than I thought it was going to, but that's okay. It looks amazing. So all we have to do today is finish the color on the stained glass and then outline all of the lines with pen to give it more like a stained glass leaded look, more like a shadowed rather than the pencil lines. And then after that, I'm gonna go do a border, but that shouldn't really take too long at all. Here I am mixing up the yellow ochre for the day with my trash brush. You can see just how much pigment I'm adding to the water to get it to be as vibrant as I can get it. And this is also why you use a crap brush for mixing. You get leftover pigment all up in it, and you also fray the bristles over time. So it's just best to use a really crappy brush for this and save your nice brush for the nice stuff. The yellows are going down. Each one has a unique value or shade that I'm trying to match. So I'm having to wait a lot between drying times since they are all literally right next to each other. I advise to not use a hairdryer as that can kind of warp the paper a little bit. What I like to do instead is just turn on a ceiling fan and Netflix and just wait it out. This is my very last square. I forgot a brown last night, so I'm just filling in any gaps that I see, making sure that I've got each square painted and painted correctly. My eyes were kind of going cross-eyed towards the end of all this. Now for the border, I want to do a loose light layer and an extremely dark layer on top of that one. I want it to be black, but I also want it to have a little pinch of brown in it as well, just to give it a little bit more definition. Now, I had originally planned to go over the pencil with a black pen and the mullion lines and lead lines and whatnot, but I really like how it looks and kind of decided not to. With stained glass, the thicker mullion lines are usually something of a necessity to hold it all in place rather than a part of the actual composition. So since this is a watercolor, I can kind of ignore those lines and instead focus more on the composition rather than its structural integrity. I'm really happy with how the border came out. I think it gives it a looser, sketchy look that the rigidity of the stained glass was kind of lacking, and the darkness of it really helps the brightness of the glass to pop. Last thing we need to do is cut it out from the paper. I cut it at 11 by 17 so it fits nicely in a standard frame size. And I love how flat the stretched paper actually gets it. If you want to see a video of my stretching process, let me know in the comments. One trick I do have is once you cut it out to lay some heavy books on it for a day, just to really flatten it out and get any of those last remaining small ripples that are left gone. And of course I have to add my signature, but that's about it. Here's a side-by-side comparison to see my reference image versus what I actually painted. How do you think it turned out? Is there anything you would do different? If you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor and say hi in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and follow us on our journey.